The moment you realize you've been abandoned. Not just by a man you loved, but by the life you thought you were building. It doesn't feel loud or dramatic. It feels quiet. Like sitting in a cold garage holding a cup of coffee that's already gone bitter. Pretending everything is still okay. When deep down you know nothing ever will be the same again. Ben took another slow bite of his burrito, chewing thoughtfully as his eyes stayed fixed on me. He had this way of looking at people, calm, steady, like he could see straight through whatever mask you were trying to wear. It wasn't uncomfortable exactly. Just impossible to hide from. Well, he said after a moment, his tone casual but laced with something deeper. If your fiancé can't recognize what he has, then that's on him. I mean it, he's a complete fool. I let out a quiet breath, staring down into my cup. Ben wasn't finished. I'll say it as many times as it takes, he continued, leaning back slightly. Any man would count himself lucky to have someone like you. You can fix an engine before sunrise and still bake something from scratch by evening. That's rare, Amber. Real rare. The words should have comforted me. They didn't. Because even though he never said Jake's name, it was there. Hanging between us. Heavy. Unavoidable. And somehow that made it worse. I forced my lips into something that resembled a smile, though it felt stiff and unnatural. We're not talking about him, remember? I said softly. Let's just drink our coffee. Ben raised both hands like he was surrendering. All right. Truce. For a few minutes after that, neither of us spoke. We just sat there on those old, overturned buckets in the corner of the garage, sipping lukewarm coffee that tasted more like habit than comfort. The world around us buzzed faintly, the distant clank of tools, the hum of engines, the occasional shout from another mechanic. But for a brief moment, it almost felt peaceful. Almost. We both pretended things were simple. But they weren't. Not even close. Because simple doesn't exist anymore once your entire future changes in the span of a single breath. Or in my case, 2 faint pink lines on a cheap plastic stick. That moment replayed in my head more times than I could count. Standing alone in a tiny bathroom. Hands trembling. Heart racing so loudly it felt like it might echo through the walls. 2 lines. Clear. Unmistakable. And just like that, everything shifted. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just stood there, staring at it. Like if I waited long enough it might somehow disappear. But it didn't. And neither did the reality that followed. Because not long after that, Jake disappeared too. At first it was small things. A missed call. A late reply. An excuse. Then more silence. Then nothing. No calls. No texts. No explanations. Just gone. And the worst part? It wasn't even the silence itself. It was that quiet, creeping feeling that settled deep in my chest. The one that whispered the truth I didn't want to accept. He wasn't coming back. I swallowed hard, pushing the thought away as I reached up and tugged the zipper of my hoodie higher, like I could somehow shield myself from everything pressing in around me. No one here could find out. No one. Especially not Armin. The owner of the garage wasn't just strict, he was the kind of man who looked for reasons to cut people loose. One mistake, one inconvenience, one problem. And you were gone. And pregnancy? That would be more than enough. He wouldn't fire me outright, not in a way that could get him in trouble, but he'd find something. A reason. A technicality. And I couldn't let that happen. Not now. Not when everything depended on this job. Rent. Bills. Savings that barely existed. And now. Baby. Ready or not. My throat tightened at the thought, but I forced myself to stay steady. I didn't have the luxury of falling apart. Not anymore. The sharp crackle of the garage speaker suddenly cut through my thoughts. Amber, you're up next. Pick up downtown. 20 minutes. I blinked, pulling myself back to the present. Got it, I muttered under my breath. I stood, tossing the empty coffee cup into a nearby bin before grabbing my keys and heading toward my cab. Hey, Ben called after me. I glanced back. Take it easy out there, all right? He said, his voice softer now, more genuine. And seriously, eat something today. Something real. Coffee doesn't count. For a split second I almost laughed. Almost. Instead I just lifted my hand in a small wave. I'll try. But we both knew I probably wouldn't. I climbed into the driver's seat, closing the door behind me as the familiar scent of worn leather and engine oil wrapped around me. It was strange how this cab, this old, slightly battered vehicle, had started to feel like the only place where I could breathe. Like everything outside it was chaos. And inside, at least for a little while, I could pretend I was in control. I slid the key into the ignition. The engine roared to life beneath my hands, steady and reliable. Unlike everything else in my life. For a moment I just sat there. Hands resting on the wheel. Eyes staring straight ahead. And then quietly, almost without realizing it, I spoke. "It's just you and me now, kid," I whispered, my voice barely audible over the hum of the engine. "We're gonna figure this out. Somehow." There was no response, of course. Just silence. But somehow, it didn't feel empty. I took a deep breath, steadying myself, and pulled the cab out of the garage. The tires rolled over the pavement, carrying me forward. Away from the safety of that quiet corner. And into a world that felt uncertain, unpredictable, and a little bit terrifying. I didn't know what was waiting for me out there. Didn't know how things would unfold. Didn't know how I was going to manage everything that was coming. But one thing was certain. As I drove out onto the road, blending into the flow of traffic, the city stretching out endlessly ahead of me, I was heading straight into a day that would change my life forever. The city didn't know my life was falling apart. Cars moved. Lights changed. People crossed streets with coffee in hand, laughing into phones, living like everything made sense. And there I was, sitting behind the wheel of my cab, pretending I was just another driver with nothing heavier on her mind than traffic and directions. But my hands on the steering wheel told a different story. They were tighter now. More careful. Like I was holding on to the last piece of control I had left. The morning passed in a blur of pickups and drop-offs. A businessman who didn't look up from his phone. A college kid who tipped me in coins. An elderly woman who called me sweetheart and pressed a wrapped candy into my palm like it was something precious. Normal moments. Small moments. But every time I stopped at a red light, every time the engine idled and the world went quiet for a second, my mind drifted back. Back to that bathroom. Back to those 2 pink lines. Back to Jake. By afternoon, the sky had turned gray, heavy clouds hanging low like they were carrying something too big to hold. The air felt thick, tart, like something was about to happen. I didn't know then just how right that feeling was. My last call of the evening came in just as I was thinking about heading back. Pick up, north edge of the city. Long distance fare. Good money. I accepted it without hesitation. The drive out took longer than expected. The roads grew quieter, emptier. Streetlights became fewer. Houses spaced farther apart. The city slowly loosened its grip until it felt like I was driving into the edges of nowhere. When I finally reached the address, I frowned. A large house stood ahead, lights blazing, music thumping so loudly I could feel it through the steering wheel. Expensive cars lined the driveway. Laughter spilled out into the night, too loud, too careless. Something about it felt. I checked the address again. It was right. I waited. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. No one came out. Finally, a man stumbled onto the porch, clearly drunk, waving his hand lazily. "Cancel it," he slurred. "He's not going anywhere tonight." And just like that, the fare was gone. Frustration tightened my chest as I grabbed my phone and called Armin. "It's cancelled," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Client isn't coming." Pause. Then his voice, sharp as ever. "Then that's your problem. Get back. And don't even think about charging for wasted time." The line went dead. I stared at the phone for a second longer than necessary. It wasn't my fault. But it didn't matter. Nothing did when you were this replaceable. I exhaled slowly, turned the wheel, and started heading back. Rain began to fall, not heavy, just enough to blur the windshield and smear the lights into long, distorted streaks. That's when I saw him. At first I thought it was debris. Or maybe an animal. A shadow near the side of the road, barely visible in the dim light. Then it moved. My heart skipped. I slowed instinctively, eyes narrowing. The figure stumbled forward. Then collapsed. I stopped the car. For a moment I just sat there. This was how bad decisions started. Stopping in the middle of nowhere. At night. For a stranger. Every instinct told me to keep driving. But then, a voice in my head. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just quiet. What if that was you? My grip tightened. Damn it. I pulled over. Rain dotted my hoodie as I stepped out, the cold biting through the fabric instantly. As I got closer, my breath caught. It was a man. Broad-shouldered. And covered in blood. Not fresh, dried in places, smeared in others, but enough to make my stomach twist. Hey, can you hear me? I crouched beside him. His lips moved slightly. Please, he whispered, barely audible. Help. And then he went still. That was it. Decision made. Getting him into the back seat wasn't easy. Every movement sent a sharp ache through my body, my breath catching as I struggled under his weight. My hand instinctively moved to my stomach for a second, but I pushed through it. There wasn't time to think. I got him in, slammed the door, and drove. The hospital lights felt blinding after the darkness of the road. Nurses rushed him away the second I pulled up, voices overlapping, urgency filling the air. Severe trauma, get him in now. BP dropping. Call surgery now. I stood there, frozen, heart pounding in my ears. Surgery. The word echoed. He wasn't just hurt. He was dying. A nurse turned to me. Are you family? No, I said quickly. I just found him. She nodded, already moving. You may have saved his life. Saved. Or just delayed something worse. Hours passed. I didn't even realize I'd stayed until someone handed me a cup of water and said, you should sit. I hadn't noticed how much I was shaking. A doctor finally approached. He's in surgery, he said. Multiple internal injuries. It's serious. My chest tightened. Will he make it? Pause. We're doing everything we can. I should have left. I should have gone home, pretended none of this happened. But I didn't. Something kept me there. Maybe it was the way he said please. Maybe it was because I knew what it felt like to be left behind. Or maybe I just couldn't walk away anymore. The next morning changed everything. Not because of the man in surgery, but because of who came looking for him. 3 men stood outside my door. Well-dressed, controlled, dangerous in the kind of way that didn't need to be loud. You're Amber, the one in front said. Not a question. A statement. Yes. You found him. My stomach dropped. How do you? He stepped forward, placing a thick envelope on my table like it weighed nothing. Consider this gratitude. I didn't touch it. Something about the way he said it felt wrong. Calculated. Not grateful. Careful. You did a good thing, he added. Now forget about it. My pulse quickened. Forget. Who is he? I asked. Pause. Then a faint smile that didn't reach his eyes. No one you need to worry about. That's when I knew. This wasn't over. Not even close. I went back to the hospital. I don't know why. Maybe curiosity. Maybe instinct. Maybe something deeper. That's when I learned the truth. He's still in surgery, the nurse said. Complications. But another nurse pulled me aside quietly. They're trying to keep him under, she whispered. Someone doesn't want him waking up. My heart dropped. What? They're interfering, she said. This isn't just medical. That was the moment everything shifted. This wasn't just about saving a man anymore. This was about stopping something. I should have walked away. I didn't. That night, I made a choice that would change everything. We got him out. Carefully, quietly, risking everything. When he finally woke up in my apartment hours later, his voice was weak, but clear. They're trying to kill me. And just like that, the real fight began. The confrontation didn't happen in some dramatic showdown. It happened in truth, in evidence, in exposing everything. The police, the investigation, the pressure. Piece by piece, the truth came out. Money, power, greed, and the man behind it all. Lost everything. Weeks later, I stood outside the hospital again. But this time, it was different. No fear. No uncertainty. Just quiet peace. He survived. The surgery. The youth. All of it. Me. I survived too. Not just everything that happened that night, but everything before it. Jake. The fear. The loneliness. I wasn't that person anymore. One evening, sitting quietly with my hand resting over my stomach, I whispered softly, "We made it." And for the first time in a long time, I believed it. Because sometimes, the worst night of your life becomes the beginning of everything that saves you.